The living room was packed with people, laughter echoing off the decorated walls. Golden balloons bobbed against the ceiling, and a massive cake sat on the dining table, waiting to be cut. It was my father's 50th birthday, a grand celebration filled with friends, colleagues, and every distant relative you could imagine. I had spent the entire day helping my mother prepare for this party, running errands, setting up decorations, making sure everything was perfect. But as I stood at the entrance, a sinking feeling took over me. Something was off. The way people smirked, the way they exchanged glances when they saw me. It was as if they were all in on a joke I wasn't aware of. Then I saw it. A simple white name tag placed on the table alongside the others. Unlike the neatly printed names of guests, mine had something else written on it. In bold black letters it read, "The Disappointment." For a moment I stood frozen. My fingers clenched into a fist as my vision blurred. I glanced around, hoping, praying, that this was some sort of mistake. But the muffled chuckles around me told me otherwise. "Oh, lighten up," my uncle's voice rang out, amused. "It's just a joke. You don't have to be so sensitive." A joke. I turned to my mother, searching her face for disapproval, for any sign that she was about to scold them for humiliating me like this. But she only sighed, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Just ignore it, honey," she whispered. "It's your father's day. Don't make a scene." I swallowed hard, feeling my heart hammer against my ribs. My father, the guest of honor, stood by the fireplace, his arms crossed as he watched me with a hint of amusement in his eyes. He wasn't stopping this. He wasn't angry on my behalf. If anything, he was enjoying it. A deep sense of betrayal curled in my stomach. This wasn't the first time I had been treated like this. For as long as I could remember, I had been the family's biggest failure. My older brother was a successful entrepreneur, my sister was in med school, and I was just me. No grand achievements, no degrees to flaunt. Just an ordinary person trying to figure out life. And to them, that was unacceptable. But this was a new low. I grabbed the name tag, crumpling it in my fist before tossing it onto the ground. The laughter only grew louder. My father shook his head, chuckling under his breath before raising his glass to the crowd. "Let's toast to that," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "To my dear son, our families." He paused, letting the word sink in. Disappointment. A chorus of laughter followed. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to run, to disappear, to make them regret this moment. But as I stood there, feeling the heat rise in my face, something inside me shifted. A spark, a fire, a quiet rage that I had never felt before. They wanted me to be a failure. Fine. But they would regret ever making me feel like one. That night, as the party carried on, I sat alone in my room, staring at the ceiling. My father's words played in my head over and over again. The humiliation, the laughter, and then the decision. I would prove them wrong. They thought I was a disappointment. They had no idea what I was capable of. The house was silent when I woke up the next morning. The echoes of laughter from last night's party still haunted my mind. I sat up in bed, staring at the ceiling, my fists clenching as the memory of that humiliating moment replayed over and over again. I needed a plan. I needed to change my life. But where would I start? The first thing I did was make a list. A list of all the things they had ever said about me. Every insult, every moment of ridicule, every time they had called me a failure. I read through them one by one, letting the words burn into my mind. This wasn't just about proving them wrong anymore. This was about proving to myself that I was more than what they thought of me. I pulled out my old laptop, the one covered in dust, and started researching ways to improve myself. Business, fitness, online work. I had no degree, no special skills, but I had determination. And determination was enough to start. For the next few weeks, I cut myself off from the family as much as possible. I ate meals in my room, stopped engaging in their meaningless conversations, and spent every waking moment working towards something. I started exercising, pushing my body to its limits. I studied online courses, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. I watched videos of successful people, learning how they overcame their struggles. It wasn't easy. Some nights, I wanted to give up. The self-doubt crept in, whispering that I would always be the disappointment. But every time I thought about quitting, I remembered that name tag. The way they laughed. The way my father raised his glass. I refused to let them win. One night, while scrolling through business ideas, I stumbled upon something that caught my attention: dropshipping. It was a business model where you didn't need inventory or a warehouse. Just a laptop, a good product, and smart marketing. It sounded too good to be true, but the more I researched, the more I realized it was a golden opportunity. With the little money I had saved up from odd jobs, I built a website. It was far from perfect, but it was a start. I found a supplier, created a brand, and set up social media pages. I barely slept, pouring every ounce of my energy into this business. A week passed. Then two. No sales. Doubt returned. Was I wasting my time? Was I really as useless as they thought? But I pushed forward, refining my strategy, changing my approach. Then, one morning, I woke up to a notification. A sale. It was only one, but it was proof. Proof that I could do this. As the days passed, my sales grew. One sale turned into 10. Then 20. Then 100. I wasn't making millions yet, but I was making progress. And progress was all I needed. Meanwhile, my family remained unaware of what I was doing. To them, I was still the same disappointment, wasting time in my room. They didn't know that I was building something. Something that would soon change everything. And I wasn't just going to prove them wrong. I was going to make them regret ever doubting me. The sales kept coming in. Each morning, I woke up to new orders, the numbers steadily climbing. My store, which once seemed like a desperate attempt to prove myself, was turning into something real. But I knew that small success wasn't enough. I had to scale up. I reinvested every dollar I made back into the business. Better marketing, new product designs, and a stronger social media presence. I studied ads, tested different strategies, and even took a few risks. Some failed, but each mistake taught me something valuable. Then it happened. One of my ads went viral. Overnight, my sales tripled. Customers flooded in, asking for more products, requesting restocks. I barely slept, handling orders, responding to emails, and making sure everything ran smoothly. My bank account, which had always been a source of embarrassment, was now growing at a rate I had never imagined. But I didn't tell my family. I wanted them to believe I was still the disappointment. Let them mock me a little longer. Let them bask in their ignorance. Because soon, the truth would hit them like a storm. One evening, as I was packing an order, my father knocked on my door. I hesitated before opening it. "Still wasting your time in here?" he asked, arms crossed. I forced a smile. "Something like that." He scoffed. "You should be looking for a real job. Something with stability. This nonsense won't take you anywhere." I nodded, biting my tongue, resisting the urge to show him the thousands of dollars sitting in my account. He walked away, shaking his head in disappointment. I closed the door and let out a breath. Not yet. Weeks passed, and my brand kept growing. I expanded into multiple products, partnered with influencers, and even started considering my next big move, scaling beyond dropshipping into full-scale e-commerce. I worked tirelessly, knowing the moment of reckoning was drawing near. Then the opportunity arrived. A major investor reached out, impressed by my rapid growth. He wanted a meeting. I knew what this meant. If I played my cards right, this wouldn't just be an online store anymore. It would be a full-fledged brand. I booked the meeting at one of the finest hotels in the city. And to make a statement, I invited my entire family. They had called me a disappointment for too long. Now it was time to make them eat their words. The day of the meeting arrived. The sun was barely up, but I was already dressed in a sharp, tailored suit, one that screamed success. As I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my tie, I took a deep breath. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. I had invited my entire family under the guise of a career discussion. My father, mother, siblings, uncles, and even distant relatives would be there. They thought they were coming to witness yet another one of my failures. They had no idea what was coming. The hotel's conference room was lavish. High ceilings, chandeliers, and a long table set for important discussions. My investor, Mr. Reynolds, was already seated when I arrived. He was a well-respected businessman, known for turning small companies into multi-million-dollar empires. If he saw potential in my brand, that meant I had done something right. Then my family arrived. They walked in, looking around in confusion. My father scoffed when he saw me at the head of the table. "What is this? Some kind of joke?" I gestured for them to sit. "Just listen." Mr. Reynolds leaned forward, smiling. "I assume you all are here because you want to know what your son has been up to?" My father folded his arms. "Wasting his time, I assume." Mr. Reynolds chuckled. "Not quite. Your son has built a business from the ground up, without any outside help. His brand has generated 6 figures in revenue within months, and I see potential for it to reach 7 figures soon." The room fell silent. My mother's eyes widened, my siblings exchanged shocked glances, and my father's face turned pale. I clicked a remote, and a presentation appeared on the massive screen behind me. Graphs, revenue reports, customer testimonials. Everything was there, laid out in front of them. "This is what I've been doing," I said, my voice steady. "While you mocked me, while you laughed at me, I was building something real. Something successful." My father cleared his throat, struggling to find words. This can't be real." Mr. Reynolds leaned back, amused. "Oh, it's very real. And I'm here today because I want to invest in his company. A substantial amount." The air grew thick with tension. My family, who had called me a disappointment for years, now sat in stunned silence. I turned to my father. "You raised your glass to toast my failure at your birthday party." I held up a glass of water and smirked. "Now, I'd like to return the favor, toasting to my success." I raised the glass and drank, savoring the moment. My father looked down, unable to meet my eyes. My mother wiped away a tear. My siblings shifted uncomfortably. It was over. I had won. The meeting was over, but the shock on my family's faces lingered long after they left the conference room. As they walked out, some in silence, some murmuring in disbelief, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and emptiness. I had proven them wrong. But was it enough? Mr. Reynolds patted my back. "You handled that well," he said. "Now, let's talk about the next steps." We sat down, going over the details of the investment. He wanted to inject capital into my brand, take it global. I had always dreamed of this moment, but now that it was happening, the weight of responsibility hit me hard. Later that evening, I returned home. The house was unusually quiet. I found my father sitting alone in the living room, staring at the floor. He didn't look up as I entered. "I underestimated you," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. I crossed my arms. "You didn't just underestimate me. You humiliated me. You made sure everyone knew I was a failure." He sighed. "I thought I was pushing you to be better. Maybe I went too far." I scoffed. "Maybe." Silence stretched between us. Then he looked at me, eyes heavy with something I had never seen before, regret. "I was wrong," he admitted. "I don't expect you to forgive me. But I want you to know that I see it now. You've made something incredible." For the first time in my life, my father was acknowledging me, not as a disappointment, but as a man who had built something on his own. "I don't need your approval," I said. "Not anymore." I turned and left, my heart pounding. This was the closure I had craved for years, but instead of feeling victorious, I felt something else. Maybe this journey wasn't just about proving them wrong. Maybe it was about proving to myself that I was always worth more than their words. With renewed determination, I focused entirely on my business. Expansion plans began, new markets opened, and within months, my company's value skyrocketed. The media took notice. Interviews, articles, and social media buzz surrounded my success. Then one day, an unexpected call came. My father. His voice was hesitant. I need your help." I frowned. "Help with what?" There was a pause before he finally admitted. "I made some bad investments. I'm losing everything." The irony hit me like a wave. The man who once mocked me for being a failure was now asking for my help. I had a choice. Help him and show that I was the bigger person, or let him face the consequences of his own arrogance. I took a deep breath. I sat there, gripping the phone tightly. My father, the man who had belittled me for years, was now asking for my help. Part of me wanted to laugh. The irony of it all. The same man who had raised his glass to toast my failure was now drowning in his own mistakes. But another part of me, the part that had worked tirelessly to prove myself, felt something else. Pity, maybe? "Why should I help you?" I finally asked, my voice colder than I intended. There was silence on the other end. Then a heavy sigh. "Because I'm your father." I clenched my jaw. He hadn't called me son. Not even once. This was about desperation, not love. "I'll think about it," I said and ended the call. For the next few days, I wrestled with the decision. My company was thriving. I had worked too hard to let old wounds dictate my actions. But at the same time, I couldn't just erase the past. I confided in Mr. Reynolds, who had become somewhat of a mentor. "What would you do?" I asked. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "That depends. Do you want revenge or resolution?" I frowned. "It's not about revenge. I just don't know if he deserves my help." Reynolds nodded. "Maybe he doesn't. But let me tell you something. Successful people don't waste energy on grudges. You've already won. The real power is in choosing who you want to be. His words stuck with me. That evening, I drove to my childhood home. The same house where I had felt worthless for so many years. As I stepped inside, my mother greeted me with tear-filled eyes. My siblings were quiet, watching. And my father, he looked like a shell of the man he once was. Tired, defeated. I sat across from him. Tell me everything. He hesitated, then began explaining how his business deals had gone south. How he had trusted the wrong people. How his pride had stopped him from asking for help sooner. How much do you need? I asked, cutting to the point. His eyes widened. You'd really help? I shrugged. You're my father. I wrote him a check. Not a gift, but a loan, with a contract to ensure he would be held accountable. If he truly wanted to fix his mistakes, he'd have to do the work. As I handed him the paper, he looked up at me, his voice trembling. I don't deserve this. I met his gaze. No, you don't. For the first time, he had nothing to say. As I left the house that night, I felt lighter. Not because I had forgiven him completely, but because I had freed myself from the weight of my past. I had proved my worth, not just to him, but to myself. And that was enough.